Sarah Collins's alarm buzzed softly at 5:30 a.m., filling the quiet room with a gentle hum. She groaned, rubbing her eyes before reaching over to silence it. Another day, another shift. Outside, the first rays of sunlight spilled through the thin curtains, painting golden lines across her small apartment. She stretched, glanced at the picture of her 7-year-old son, Ethan, smiling from the nightstand, and whispered, "One more day, baby. Mommy's got this." Sarah was a paramedic, tough, calm, and kind-hearted. Her workdays were long, often filled with chaos, pain, and life-or-death moments. But she loved what she did. Every time she helped save someone's life, it reminded her why she'd chosen this path: to make a difference, no matter how small. She quickly brewed herself a cup of coffee, took a bite of toast, and tied her long brown hair into a bun. Her uniform hung neatly by the door, pressed and ready, with her name tag shining faintly under the hallway light. The morning air was crisp when she stepped outside. The neighborhood was still half asleep. Only the sound of birds and the distant rumble of a delivery truck broke the silence. Sarah inhaled deeply, the smell of rain from the night before still fresh in the air. She climbed into her old silver Honda and started the engine, glancing once more at the small drawing her son had taped to the dashboard. It was a crayon sketch of her in uniform, holding a big red heart. Beneath it, in wobbly letters, he had written, "My hero." That simple note gave her strength every morning. The hospital was a 20-minute drive away, but she enjoyed those quiet moments before the day's rush. She would listen to soft music, hum along, and mentally prepare for whatever emergencies awaited her. Today felt normal, routine even, the kind of peaceful morning that made her believe the world could be kind. When Sarah reached the hospital, the smell of disinfectant and coffee hit her immediately. Her colleagues greeted her warmly. "Morning, Collins," one of the nurses called. "Heard you saved another one last night." Sarah smiled modestly, shrugging. "Just doing my job," she said, setting her bag down and reviewing the shift board. Her day began like any other, responding to calls, treating accident victims, calming panicked families. She handled everything with patience and quiet bravery. Even during the toughest cases, she stayed composed. It was something her co-workers admired about her. The way she could face blood, pain, and loss, yet still smile when comforting a frightened child or an elderly patient. By the time her shift ended, the sun had already dipped below the horizon. The hospital lights flickered softly as she clocked out, rubbing her tired eyes. "Long one today?" her partner, Jake, asked. "Yeah," she sighed, forcing a tired smile. "Can't wait to see my kid and crash." As she walked to the parking lot, she noticed the quiet streets. It was late, around 10:30 p.m. The city had slowed down. Most people were home, lights off, doors locked. She checked her phone. No messages from Ethan's babysitter, which meant he was asleep, safe and sound. Relief washed over her. She climbed into her car, turned on the heater, and began the drive home. Usually, she took the main route through the city, but tonight she felt too exhausted to deal with red lights and traffic cameras. Instead, she decided to take a shortcut, a quiet stretch through the industrial area. It was a little darker and emptier, but faster. She told herself she'd be fine. She had driven that way before. As her car rolled through the near-empty streets, her mind wandered. She thought about her son's upcoming school play, what groceries she needed for the week, and maybe, just maybe, taking a weekend off. She deserved it, she thought. A little break, a little peace. The streetlights grew fewer as she entered the industrial zone. Old warehouses and auto shops lined the road, their windows dark and shuttered. A flickering streetlight buzzed overhead, casting strange shadows. Sarah turned up the radio slightly, trying to drown out the uneasy silence. She wasn't easily scared. Years as a paramedic had taught her to face fear, but something about that quiet made her fingers tighten around the steering wheel. Still, she reminded herself, almost home. She could already picture her son's sleepy face, his soft voice asking for just one more bedtime story. That thought made her smile. She slowed at a red light, tapping her fingers on the steering wheel to the rhythm of the song playing. And then, movement. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed two figures stepping out from behind a dumpster. Her stomach clenched. At first, she thought maybe they were just pedestrians crossing the road. But then one of them raised his arm. Under the yellow streetlight, the metallic glint was unmistakable. A gun. Her breath caught in her throat. For a heartbeat, she froze. Her mind screamed to lock the doors, drive, do something. But her body refused to move. The man stepped closer, the gun pointed directly at her windshield. His face was half covered by a black hood, his eyes wild. Another man followed, shouting something she couldn't fully hear through the closed windows. In that split second, Sarah's training as a medic collided with raw human terror. Her pulse pounded so hard she could hear it echoing in her ears. She slowly lifted her hands, trying not to make any sudden moves. The gunman's lips moved again, shouting louder this time, ordering her to get out. The night, once calm and ordinary, had transformed into something else. Something sharp, dangerous, and unreal. A few minutes ago, she'd been thinking about bedtime stories. Now, she was staring down the cold black barrel of a gun, her entire life flashing before her eyes. And deep inside, beneath the panic, a single thought anchored her. I have to make it home. For him. That's when she took her first breath again, and made the smallest move that would later change everything. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she gripped the steering wheel tighter. Her mind was screaming at her to think, to move, to do something. But fear had a way of freezing time. The two men were now only a few feet away, their dark figures illuminated by the flickering streetlight above. One had a gun. The other held out a trembling hand, shouting for her to get out of the car. Her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear their words. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to breathe. Her training as a paramedic had always been about staying calm in chaos, car crashes, heart attacks, emergencies, but this was different. She was the emergency now. Slowly, she lifted both hands into the air, trying to show she wasn't a threat. Her voice cracked slightly as she said through the closed window, Okay, I'm coming out. Don't hurt me. The man with the gun yanked on the car door handle, but it was locked. He slammed the barrel of the gun against the window, the sound ringing out like thunder in the empty street. Sarah flinched. Her pulse was racing, but her thoughts were clear now. She knew sudden movements could get her killed, so she nodded quickly, unlocking the door from inside. As it opened, the cold night air rushed in, carrying the faint smell of metal and oil from the old factories nearby. Get out! The man barked. His voice was young but hard, like someone pretending to sound tougher than he was. Sarah stepped out carefully, her knees slightly shaking, trying not to look directly at the gun. The second man moved around her car, shouting, Give me the bag! Purse, phone, everything. Sarah handed over her purse, her voice calm but trembling. Take it. Just please don't hurt me. Inside her mind, she was memorizing everything. The sound of their voices, the shape of their shoes, the jagged tattoo of a snake curling around the wrist of the man holding the gun. Every detail could matter later if she made it out alive. The gunman pointed the weapon at her chest now, eyes darting nervously. You got anything else? Money? Watch. She shook her head, trying to appear smaller, weaker, harmless. No, that's all I have, she whispered. The second man, the one searching her bag, cursed under his breath. There's barely anything in here, he snapped, tossing her phone to the ground, smashing it. You picked the wrong car, man, he said to his partner. Sarah's mind worked fast. They were desperate, probably amateurs. Maybe high, maybe scared too. She noticed the gunman's hand shaking, not steady like someone trained. That small detail gave her a strange sense of hope. If they were nervous, they could make mistakes. But one mistake could also end her life. Please, she said softly. I have a son. He's just a little boy. I need to go home to him. For a second, she thought she saw something human flicker in the gunman's eyes, a hesitation. But the other man shouted, Shut her up. We're wasting time. The gunman stepped closer. The cold muzzle pressed against her forehead. Every muscle in her body went rigid. The world seemed to blur around her. The lights, the sounds, everything faded except that one feeling. Metal against skin. She thought of Ethan. His laugh. The way he hugged her when she came home tired. His innocent voice calling her my hero. She wanted to see him again, to tell him she loved him. Her instincts screamed to survive. She knew she had to do something, but not yet. Not while the gun was so close. Timing mattered more than fear. The man with the tattoo was still distracted, muttering angrily about her bag. The gunman's focus wavered for a second as he glanced toward the sound of a barking dog in the distance. That tiny distraction was all she noticed, but it was enough for a thought to spark. If she moved now, she could either live or die trying. She remembered something she'd once heard from a police officer who came to speak at her hospital. When fear freezes your body, remind yourself that moving might be your only chance. That voice echoed in her mind as she took a slow, shaky breath. Please, she whispered again, her voice breaking. The gunman's eyes flicked down to her for a brief second, his finger tightening on the trigger just slightly. Sarah's pulse surged. That's when instinct took over. In one swift motion, she ducked low and shoved the car door with all her strength. The heavy metal slammed into the gunman's arm, knocking it sideways. The gun went off, but the shot missed, echoing through the empty street like a thunderclap. The man stumbled backward, shouting in shock and pain. The other man screamed, "What are you doing, idiot?" as he grabbed for the gun. Sarah didn't wait to see what happened next. She dropped to the ground, rolling away from the car, her hands scraping against the rough pavement. Her heart was hammering so fast she thought it might explode. She heard shouting, feet pounding, another gunshot, but this one sounded different, sharper. Then came silence. Sarah froze behind the side of her car, trying to catch her breath. She dared to peek out just as the gun clattered to the ground. One of the men screamed, clutching his shoulder, blood spreading across his sleeve. She didn't understand what had just happened, who had fired that second shot. Out of the darkness, a commanding voice shouted, "Police! Drop the weapon!" Her eyes widened. A man in plain clothes stepped out from behind a warehouse corner, holding his own gun steady. Later, she would learn he was an off-duty officer who'd been nearby when he heard the commotion. But in that moment, Sarah could barely process anything beyond the miracle that she was still breathing. Her body trembled uncontrollably as adrenaline flooded her veins. She stayed crouched behind her car, tears burning her eyes, half in shock, half in relief. The two attackers ran, leaving everything behind, their footsteps fading into the night. The officer called for backup, but his voice sounded distant to her, muffled, like she was underwater. Sarah pressed a trembling hand to her chest, feeling her heart still pounding, proof that she was alive. She whispered to herself, almost in disbelief, "I'm okay. I'm okay." The calm, ordinary night she'd known just hours ago was gone forever. But somewhere deep inside, she knew something had changed in her. She had faced death and refused to be its victim. The street was silent again, except for Sarah's ragged breathing and the faint echo of the last gunshot fading into the night. Her hands trembled as she crouched behind her car, afraid to move. She could smell the smoke from the gunpowder in the air, sharp and metallic, mixing with the cold night breeze. The world felt distant, unreal, like she was trapped inside a nightmare that refused to end. "Ma'am, stay down," the man's voice called again. It was firm, steady, and close now. Sarah slowly lifted her head and saw him. A man in plain clothes, maybe in his 40s, with sharp eyes and a calm expression. He held his gun steady, pointed toward the street where the attackers had fled. His movements were quick but controlled. Sarah didn't know whether to cry or run. She just nodded weakly, her voice barely a whisper. "They tried to rob me. They had a gun." "I know," the man said, his tone gentler now. "You're safe. I'm a police officer. Off duty. I heard the shots." He looked at her car, then back at her face, noticing the terror still frozen in her eyes. "You did good. You stayed calm. That probably saved your life. Sarah blinked, still shaking. The word safe barely felt real. She glanced at the spot where the attackers had stood only minutes ago. One of them had dropped something, a wallet maybe, or part of her bag. But all she could see in her mind was the gun. The way it had gleamed under the light. The cold metal pressed against her forehead. She tried to stand, but her legs were weak. The officer reached out a hand to steady her. Easy now. Take a breath. She nodded again, trying to focus. Her body felt heavy, but her mind was racing. She looked around. Her car door was still open. Her phone shattered on the ground, her purse half torn apart. Her ID and a few cards were scattered on the pavement. The memory of the two men flashed in her mind again. The taller one with the hood and trembling hands, the other with the tattoo of a snake coiled around his wrist. She couldn't forget that tattoo even if she tried. It was burned into her memory. They took my things, she said, her voice still shaky. But I saw their faces. I can describe them. The officer nodded approvingly. Good. That helps a lot. He kept his gun ready but seemed calmer now, like he'd already scanned the area and decided the men were gone. Then he pressed a hand to the small radio on his belt. This is Officer Daniels, off duty. Reporting shots fired near Brookfield Industrial Road. Possible armed robbery. Victim is safe. Suspects fled west on foot. Hearing him speak those words made it feel more real. Sarah hugged herself, shivering even though it wasn't that cold. The adrenaline that had kept her moving was fading fast, replaced by a deep trembling that came from somewhere inside her. Minutes later, the distant sound of sirens filled the night. Red and blue lights began to flash against the metal walls of the warehouses. 2 police cars screeched to a stop near them, and uniformed officers jumped out, weapons drawn, scanning the area. Daniels identified himself quickly, and the other officers lowered their guns, shifting their focus to Sarah. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" one of them asked. Sarah shook her head slowly. No, just scared." Her voice cracked on the last word. "Let's get you checked out," another officer said, guiding her gently toward the ambulance that had just arrived. Ironically, Sarah, who had spent years working inside ambulances, was now the one being treated. She almost laughed at the absurdity of it, but tears came instead. A young medic wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and offered her water. "You're okay now. You're safe," he said softly, but the words felt strange to her. She didn't feel safe. Not yet. As she sat on the back of the ambulance, she could see police combing the area, taking photos, marking the spots where shell casings had fallen. One of them picked up her broken phone with gloved hands. Another officer called out, "We've got a wallet here." They'd found something one of the attackers had dropped. Inside, there was a driver's license. The name read, Jason Miller. Sarah heard them mention it and froze. "That's him," she said quietly. "He was the one with the gun." The officers exchanged quick looks. One nodded. "We've had reports on him before, armed robbery, assaults. Been hiding around this area." Sarah stared at the ground, her mind trying to process everything. It felt strange to know their names, to hear their crimes spoken aloud. These weren't just shadows anymore. They were real men with histories of hurting others. And tonight, she had been their next victim. Officer Daniels approached her again. "We'll take your statement soon. You were brave out there, Sarah." She looked up, startled that he remembered her name. "How do you?" He smiled faintly. "Your ID was on the ground. You kept your head under pressure. Most people freeze. But you moved when it mattered." Sarah tried to smile back, but her lips quivered. "I didn't even think. I just wanted to go home to my son." Daniels nodded. "That's what kept you alive." Hours passed as the investigation continued. They took her statement carefully, letting her describe every detail she could remember. Their height, clothes, voices, even the way the gunman's hand trembled. The officers were impressed by how much she had noticed, even while terrified. When everything was done, one of the officers offered to drive her home. As they pulled away from the scene, Sarah looked out the window, watching the flashing lights fade behind her. It all felt like a blur now, The noise, the fear, the sudden gunfire. But one thing was clear. Her life had changed in that alleyway. At home, when she quietly entered her apartment, her babysitter was asleep on the couch. Her little boy lay peacefully in bed, his chest rising and falling with each small breath. Sarah knelt beside him, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. Tears filled her eyes, but this time they weren't from fear. They were from gratitude. She whispered softly, "Mommy's home, baby. I'm safe." That night she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the gun again, the face of the man who almost took her life. But beneath all that fear was a flicker of strength. A quiet voice inside her that said she had survived, and she wasn't done fighting. What she didn't know was that the nightmare wasn't fully over. The police would find the men soon, but not before one final twist that would test her courage again. Sarah couldn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, the memory replayed in her head. The flicker of the gun, the sharp sound of a shot, the man's shouting, and the way her heart had almost stopped beating. She'd survived, yes, but the fear still clung to her like a shadow. Each sound outside her window made her flinch. She checked the locks twice, then 3 times, before finally sitting on the couch with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Morning came too soon. The sunlight poured in through the blinds, but it didn't feel warm. Her son, Ethan, ran into her arms, laughing and asking for breakfast like nothing had happened. For a few moments, Sarah just held him tightly, breathing in his scent, grateful that she was still there to see his smile. "Mommy, you okay?" he asked, tilting his head curiously. She smiled weakly. "I'm okay, sweetheart. Mommy's just tired." After dropping him off at school, she stopped by the police station to finish her statement. Officer Daniels was there, sipping coffee as he looked through a file. "Morning, Sarah," he said kindly. "You doing all right?" She nodded, though the dark circles under her eyes said otherwise. "I'm trying," she admitted. "I just keep hearing that sound. The shot." Daniels gave her a sympathetic look. "That's normal. Takes time. But you did everything right that night. You're the reason you're alive." As they went through her statement again, a younger officer walked in holding a folder. "Sir, we've identified both suspects, Jason Miller and Eric Cole. They've been linked to 3 robberies this month. We're setting up a search in the West District." Daniels looked up. "Good. Keep me updated." Sarah's heart raced hearing those names again. "So they're still out there?" she asked quietly. The officer nodded. "We'll get them soon, ma'am. Don't worry." But it was hard not to. Knowing those men were still free made her skin crawl. She nodded silently and thanked them before leaving. That evening, she picked up Ethan from school, trying her best to act normal. They stopped by a grocery store on the way home, and for the first time in 2 days, she felt a small sense of calm returning. But fear has a strange way of waiting in the corners, silent until it strikes again. As she loaded groceries into her car, she noticed something. A black sedan parked a few rows away, engine running, 2 silhouettes inside. She froze, her hand tightening on the cart handle. Maybe it was nothing, she told herself, just someone waiting for a friend. But her gut told her otherwise. She quickly got in the car, locked the doors, and started driving. In the rearview mirror, she saw the black sedan pull out too. Her breath caught. They were following her. The streets blurred past as she tried to think. Should she drive home? No, if they were following her, that would lead them straight to Ethan. She turned sharply onto a side road, then another, watching the car behind her mirror every move she made. Her hands trembled on the wheel. She spotted a small police substation ahead and pressed on the gas, her heart pounding. But just before she reached it, the sedan sped up and swerved in front of her, blocking the road. 2 men stepped out. Her worst fear came alive again. It was them, Jason and Eric. Sarah's breath stopped. She locked the doors and reached for her phone. But it was too late. Jason, the man with the snake tattoo, slammed his hand against her window. "Thought you could get us caught, huh?" he shouted, his voice dripping with anger. "You think you can just walk away after what you did?" She could see the madness in his eyes. The gun glinted in his hand again, the same one from that night. Her mind raced. No one else was around. No witnesses, no sound except the hum of her shaking car. "Get out!" he yelled, pointing the gun directly at her. Sarah knew begging wouldn't work this time. He wasn't looking for money anymore, he wanted revenge. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her heart hammered, every beat screaming at her to run. But she was trapped. Then, something in her changed. Fear turned into focus. Her eyes flicked to the side mirror. Behind her, she saw an old pickup truck turning onto the same street, still a few meters away. It wasn't much, but it was a chance. She whispered to herself, "Not this time." Jason stepped closer to the window, raising the gun higher. The sound of the truck approaching grew louder. Sarah took a slow breath. Timing was everything. Her pulse slowed, not from calmness, but from control. The second he looked toward the truck, distracted by the headlights, Sarah slammed her car into reverse. The tires screeched as she hit the gas, the car jerking backward hard. Jason shouted in surprise, stumbling back. The gun fired, a flash of light, a deafening crack, but the bullet hit the windshield and ricocheted off. Sarah didn't stop. She twisted the wheel and floored the accelerator, slamming the car into drive. The truck driver honked in confusion as she sped past, barely missing him. Behind her, Jason and Eric scrambled to get back into their car, shouting angrily. But Sarah was already gone, tears streaming down her face, her hands trembling as she drove straight toward the main highway. Her phone buzzed with a message she hadn't noticed before, from Officer Daniels. It read, "Call me if you see anything suspicious. We're close to catching them." She let out a shaky laugh between sobs. "You have no idea," she whispered to herself. When she finally pulled into the police station parking lot, she could barely breathe. Daniels ran out the moment he saw her car. "Sarah, what happened?" he shouted. She stumbled out, pointing back toward the road. "They found me. They followed me." Within minutes, every patrol car in the area was mobilized. Sirens wailed as they raced into the night. Sarah sat inside the station, wrapped in a blanket again, her heart still beating wildly. She could hear the radio chatter. The officers had spotted the black sedan heading north. Her hands shook as she pressed them to her face. It was almost over, she told herself. Almost. But deep down, she knew this wasn't just about survival anymore. They had tried to take everything from her, her peace, her courage, her safety, and she wasn't going to let them win. That night, for the first time, Sarah didn't just feel like a survivor. She felt something stronger, like a mother, a fighter, and a woman who refused to be silenced ever again. The night air was thick with tension. Police sirens echoed faintly in the distance as Sarah sat trembling in the station, clutching a paper cup of water that shook in her hand. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. Officer Daniels stood nearby, speaking rapidly into his radio. Black sedan heading north on Route 14. Suspects armed and dangerous. Approach with caution. Sarah's heart was still racing. She couldn't stop replaying what had just happened. The gun in Jason's hand, his furious eyes, the loud bang of the shot that missed her by inches. It all felt unreal. She could still feel the vibration of the gunshot ringing through her chest. Daniels approached her, his voice calm but firm. "Sarah, you did the right thing coming straight here. You saved your life again. They won't get far this time." She nodded slowly, but her mind was still in shock. I just want this to be over," she whispered. "I want to go home to my son and not look over my shoulder anymore." Daniels gave her a reassuring pat on the shoulder. "You will, I promise." He turned toward the other officers, who were loading their weapons and preparing to head out. "Let's move. They're not slipping away tonight." Moments later, a radio call came in. "Unit 23 to base. We've spotted the black sedan near Miller's scrapyard. Looks like they've stopped." Daniels grabbed his jacket. "That's them," he said, turning back to Sarah. "Stay here. You're safe now." But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Something deep inside her told her the night was far from done. Out on the dark, narrow road by the scrapyard. 2 patrol cars crept closer, their headlights dimmed. The air smelled of rust and oil, the silence broken only by the sound of gravel crunching under tires. Inside the black sedan, Jason and Eric sat breathing heavily. Jason's arm was bleeding where the glass had cut him earlier, but his anger burned hotter than the pain. "This is your fault," Eric hissed, glaring at him. "We should have left town days ago." Jason slammed his fist against the dashboard. "She ruined everything. Because of her, the cops are all over us." He winced as blood dripped from his sleeve. "No, I'm not running anymore. She's the reason I got shot last time. I'm going to end this." Eric looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "You're bleeding, man. We need to go." But Jason didn't listen. He loaded his gun again, the click echoing through the car. "You go if you want. I'm not leaving until I finish this." Meanwhile, Officer Daniels and his team surrounded the area quietly. He raised his hand, signaling the others to take position. "On my mark," he whispered into his radio. The officers crept closer, their boots silent against the gravel. The scrapyard loomed ahead, full of rusted metal and shadows. Suddenly, a gunshot cracked through the night. One of the officers ducked behind a car, shouting, "Shots fired! Shots fired!" Chaos erupted. Jason had opened fire, desperate and wild. Bullets ricocheted off the scrap metal as police shouted orders. "Drop the weapon! Put it down now!" But Jason kept shooting until his gun clicked empty. Breathing hard, he ducked behind an old car, reloading quickly. Eric was nowhere to be seen. He'd bolted the moment the first shots rang out, disappearing into the darkness. Daniels crouched low, gripping his own gun. "Jason Miller," he shouted. "It's over. Put the weapon down." Jason laughed bitterly, his voice echoing through the junkyard. "Over? You think it's over? You cops can't save her next time." Danielle's jaw tightened. "You won't get another chance." Jason moved again, peeking from behind a pile of metal. The moonlight glinted off his gun. He raised it, aiming toward the direction of the voice. He didn't know Daniels had already moved. One sharp, controlled sound split the air. A single shot. For a moment, everything froze. Then Jason's body went still, the gun slipping from his hand as he fell backward onto the gravel. The echo of the shot faded slowly, swallowed by the night. Daniels lowered his weapon, exhaling shakily. "Suspect down," he said into his radio. "Repeat, suspect down." Officers rushed forward, securing the area. One of them checked Jason's pulse and shook his head. Daniels stood silently for a moment, his face unreadable. It wasn't triumph, just relief that it was finally over. Back at the station, Sarah sat anxiously, watching the clock. Every minute felt like an hour. Then, finally, the door opened and Daniels walked in, his uniform dusty and streaked with dirt. She stood up instantly. "Is it over?" she asked, her voice trembling. Daniels nodded. "It's over." Her eyes filled with tears. Tears of relief, exhaustion, and disbelief. "Both of them. One got away," he said. "But Jason, he won't be hurting anyone again." Sarah sank back into the chair, her hands covering her face as she let out a long, shaky breath. For the first time in days, she felt the weight lift off her chest. She wasn't shaking anymore. She wasn't running. Daniels sat across from her, his tone softer now. "You're one of the toughest people I've met, Sarah. You faced something most people wouldn't survive, and you stood your ground." She gave a faint smile, her eyes still wet. "I didn't feel brave. I just wanted to live. For my son. That's what real courage is," he said simply. Later that night, when she finally returned home, the world seemed quieter. Ethan was asleep again, clutching his stuffed bear. Sarah sat beside him, brushing her fingers through his hair. For the first time, the silence felt peaceful. Outside, the wind rustled softly against the windows. Somewhere far away, the last echoes of that gunshot still lingered, a single sound that had ended the nightmare. As she watched her son sleep, Sarah whispered to herself, "It's over. We're safe now. But deep inside, she knew that moment would stay with her forever. The night when fear met courage, and one silent shot decided everything. The sun rose slowly the next morning, painting the sky in soft orange and gold. For the first time in days, Sarah felt a strange calm inside her. She stood by the window, holding a cup of coffee, watching the light break through the clouds. The nightmare seemed to have ended, but something still felt unfinished. Jason was gone, but Eric was still out there. The man who had once called Jason his brother was now a dangerous fugitive, and he knew where Sarah lived. Officer Daniels had warned her to stay inside, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that Eric wouldn't disappear quietly. She had seen that same darkness in his eyes, the same anger that had once driven Jason. He wouldn't let go so easily. Still, she tried to pretend life was returning to normal. She cooked breakfast for Ethan, helped him with his homework, and smiled when he asked if they could visit the park later. But deep down, her heart stayed alert to every noise, every shadow that passed by the window. That evening, Daniels came by to check on her. He looked tired, his eyes heavy from lack of sleep. "We're still searching," he said as he stood at her door. "We found Eric's car near the train tracks, but he wasn't there. He's desperate now, Sarah. If he contacts you or you see anything unusual, you call me immediately. Understand?" Sarah nodded. "I will." Before leaving, Daniels hesitated. "You did good, you know. Most people would have broken by now." Sarah smiled faintly. "Maybe I already did. I'm just trying to hold the pieces together." After he left, the night came quickly. The house was quiet except for the ticking clock in the hallway. Sarah checked every door and window twice before finally sitting on the couch with Ethan. The boy had fallen asleep with his head on her lap, holding her hand tightly. She brushed his hair gently and whispered, "You're safe now, baby. Mommy's here." But outside, someone else was watching. Eric had been hiding in the shadows all day, his mind running wild with fear and rage. He had no plan left, no friends, no escape. Jason was dead, the gang was gone, and his name was already on every police radio. He blamed Sarah for everything. If she hadn't gone to the police, Jason would still be alive. In his twisted thoughts, she was the reason his life had fallen apart. From across the street, he saw the faint glow of her living room light. He could see her silhouette through the curtains, her and the boy. His fists tightened around the handle of the gun he had stolen from a car days earlier. "You took everything from me," he muttered under his breath. "Now I'll take it all back." Inside, Sarah suddenly felt uneasy. The same cold fear she had felt the night Jason attacked crept back into her chest. The air seemed too still. She turned off the TV and listened. Nothing but silence. But then a faint creak came from outside, near the back door. Her heart started pounding. She slowly lifted Ethan's head and placed him gently on the couch. Then she moved toward the kitchen, every step careful and quiet. The doorknob rattled softly. Someone was trying to open it. Sarah froze. Her breath caught in her throat. The noise stopped. Then came a whisper, Eric's voice. "Sarah, open the door. I just want to talk." She backed away slowly, shaking her head even though he couldn't see her. "No. Go away, Eric. Please," he said again, his tone low but trembling. "I didn't mean for things to go this far." But Sarah had learned from the last time. His voice might have sounded desperate, but she knew what he was capable of. She reached for the phone with shaking hands and dialed Daniel's number. It rang once, twice, then his voice came through. "Sarah, he's here," she whispered. "Eric's here." "Stay calm," Daniels said quickly. "I'm on my way. Lock yourself in a room and stay quiet. Don't open that door, no matter what." But before she could move, a loud crash shattered the glass. Eric had kicked the door open. Sarah screamed and dropped the phone as he stepped into the kitchen. His eyes wild, the gun trembling in his hand. "You couldn't just stay quiet," he shouted. "You had to go to the cops." "Please, Eric," Sarah said, backing away. "You don't have to do this. Jason's gone. You can still walk away." His face twisted in anger. "Walk away? From what? My whole life's over because of you." Ethan woke up at the sound of shouting. "Mom!" he cried out. The small voice made Eric glance toward the living room. That brief moment was all Sarah needed. She grabbed the metal fire poker from beside the fireplace and swung it with all her strength. It hit Eric's arm, knocking the gun from his hand. He yelled in pain, but Sarah didn't stop. She grabbed Ethan and ran toward the stairs. "Go, baby, go!" she shouted, pushing him ahead. Eric stumbled after them, clutching his arm. He kicked over a chair, rage blinding him. "You think you can run again?" Just then, flashing red and blue lights filled the front yard. Sirens blared outside as police cars surrounded the house. Officer Daniels jumped out, gun drawn. "Eric, drop it now." Eric turned toward the sound, panic flooding his face. He reached for the gun again, but Daniels fired first, hitting the ground inches from his feet. "Don't move," Daniels shouted. Eric froze, his body shaking. The officers rushed in, tackling him to the floor. The gun slid across the tiles. Sarah stood on the stairs, holding Ethan tightly, tears streaming down her face. It was over, really over this time. Daniels looked up at her, breathing hard but smiling. "You're safe, Sarah. He's done." Sarah couldn't speak. She just nodded, holding her son as tightly as she could. The house was a mess. Glass shattered, furniture broken, but she didn't care, because for the first time in a long time, she knew she wouldn't have to run anymore. As the police led Eric away, Sarah whispered to Ethan, "We're free now." Outside, dawn was breaking again. A new beginning, after all the darkness they had survived. The days after Eric's arrest felt unreal for Sarah. For the first time in months, she woke up without fear pounding in her chest. The house was still, quiet, and safe. The broken glass had been cleaned, the doors fixed, but she could still feel the echoes of that terrible night in every corner of her home. Ethan had gone back to school, smiling again, his laughter slowly returning. But for Sarah, the real healing was only beginning. Officer Daniels stopped by a few days later, holding a folder under his arm. His face was calm but serious. "Sarah," he said as she opened the door, "there's something you should know. We've found some things during the investigation. Things that might help you understand why Jason and Eric came after you." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean? Can I come in?" he asked gently. They sat in the living room, sunlight streaming through the curtains. Daniels opened the folder and laid out a few photographs and documents on the table. "When we searched Jason's place, we found these," he said. "Turns out Jason and Eric weren't just running small scams. They were part of something much bigger." Sarah leaned forward, her hands trembling slightly. The photos showed Jason standing with other men, faces she didn't recognize, but the symbols on their jackets were clear. It wasn't just a gang. It was an organized group tied to illegal arms deals. "Oh my God," she whispered. "He told me it was just gambling, just debts." Daniels shook his head. "No, it was more than that. He got in deep, and when the group realized he'd started talking about leaving, they put a price on his head. That's why he panicked. That's why he came to you. He thought you had money or something that could help him disappear." Sarah sat back, stunned. "He said he wanted to protect me, but he was just trying to save himself." Daniels nodded slowly. "At first, yes, but from what we found, I think he started regretting what he'd done. There's a voicemail he left on one of the burner phones. We traced it this morning. You might want to hear it." He handed her a small recorder and pressed play. Jason's voice came through, shaky and low. "Sarah, if you're hearing this, I've already messed up too bad to fix it. I never wanted to hurt you. I swear I didn't. I just didn't know who else to turn to. Tell Ethan. Tell him his dad was stupid, but he loved him." Sarah covered her mouth as tears welled up in her eyes. For all his violence, for all his choices, hearing his voice so broken tore something inside her. "Why did he do all this?" she asked softly. "Why didn't he just walk away?" Daniels sighed. "People like Jason, they don't know how. Once they get caught in that world, they think there's no escape. But he made one right choice. He tried to protect you in the end." That's probably why Eric came after you again. He thought you knew more than you did. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air in the room felt heavy with the truth. Finally, Sarah said quietly, I just want to move on. For Ethan. For both of us. Daniels gave her a reassuring smile. And you will. We're recommending you for the witness protection relocation, at least until the trial is over. Eric's testifying against some of the people in that organization. Once it's done, you'll finally be free. She looked at him, her eyes filled with cautious hope. Free? She repeated softly, as if trying to believe it. That night, after Ethan had gone to bed, Sarah sat alone in the living room. The old clock ticked softly. She looked at a framed photo on the table, her, Jason, and Ethan from years ago, before everything went wrong. Jason's arm was around her, his smile still gentle back then. She whispered, You could have been so much more. Then she closed her eyes and let a tear slide down her cheek. Outside, the sound of crickets filled the night. The world seemed peaceful again. But Sarah knew peace wasn't just about silence. It was about learning to breathe again, to live without fear, to believe in tomorrow. The next day, Daniels came by with the relocation papers. We'll keep your identity protected until the court hearing, he explained. You'll get a new address, new phone, new start. Think of it as a clean slate. Sarah smiled faintly. A clean slate sounds perfect. Ethan, standing beside her, looked confused. Are we moving again, Mom? Yes, sweetheart, she said gently, kneeling beside him. But this time it's not because we're running. It's because we're starting fresh. Ethan's face lit up with a shy smile. Will there be a park near the new house? She laughed softly. I'm sure there will be. As they packed their things over the next few days, Sarah felt lighter. Every item she folded into a box felt like closing a chapter of her old life. The fear, the hiding, the pain. All of it was being left behind. On the last night before they left, she stood outside watching the stars. The cool breeze brushed against her face. Daniels had stopped by one last time, leaning against his car. You did it, he said quietly. You made it through. Sarah smiled at him, her eyes glistening. I didn't think I would. But I guess. Sometimes surviving is the bravest thing we can do. He nodded. You're stronger than you think. When she finally got into the car with Ethan the next morning, the sun was rising again, just like it had the morning after Jason's death. But this sunrise felt different. It wasn't just light after darkness. It was a promise of new beginnings. As they drove away, Ethan looked out the window and said, Mom, are we safe now? Sarah smiled softly and squeezed his hand. Yes, baby, she said. We're finally safe. And for the first time in a long time, she truly believed it. The new town was quiet, surrounded by open fields and soft hills. The air smelled of pine and rain, and for the first time in years, Sarah felt she could breathe freely. The small house the program had given her wasn't fancy, but it felt like a home. A safe place where no one knew her name, no one whispered about what had happened, and no one looked at her with pity. She and Ethan had new names now, new identities, and a new start. Ethan adjusted faster than she expected. On their first day in town, he ran straight to the park near their street, laughing as he climbed the swings and talked to other children. Watching him play, Sarah felt something warm in her heart, the kind of peace she thought she would never feel again. For months, she had been running, hiding, fighting just to survive. But now the world felt still. At night, she would sit by the window, drinking tea and listening to the crickets. The silence was comforting. No shouts, no sirens, no footsteps outside the door. Just quiet. Sometimes she thought about Jason, not with anger anymore, but with sadness. He had made terrible choices, but there was once love there, once a family that could have been happy. She let the memories come and go like waves, no longer drowning her. A few weeks later, Sarah started working at a local cafe. The owner, an older woman named Mrs. Brooks, was kind and welcoming. You've got a gentle way about you, she said one afternoon as Sarah helped serve coffee. People trust you easily. Sarah smiled softly. I've learned how to listen, she replied. Mrs. Brooks nodded. That's a rare gift. Most folks just want to talk. The job gave Sarah something she hadn't had in a long time, a routine. She liked waking up early, making breakfast for Ethan, walking him to school, then heading to work. Life was simple, ordinary, beautiful. One rainy afternoon, as she closed up the cafe, the bell above the door rang. Officer Daniels walked in, shaking the rain off his coat. Sarah froze for a moment, shocked. "Daniels?" she whispered, her voice trembling. He smiled warmly. "Or whatever name you're going by now," he said softly. She couldn't believe her eyes. "How did you find me?" "Don't worry," he said quickly. "I didn't come here for work. The trial's over. Eric gave his statement, and the people behind Jason's group are behind bars for good. You don't have to hide anymore, Sarah. It's over officially this time." Sarah felt her knees go weak. She leaned against the counter, tears welling up. "It's really over?" Daniels nodded. "Completely. You're free." For a long moment, she couldn't speak. The weight she had carried for so long finally lifted. All the nights of fear, all the running, the hiding, the pain gone. She didn't even realize she was crying until Daniels handed her a napkin from the counter. "I don't even know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," he replied gently. "Just live." They talked for a while about the trial, about how Eric had broken down in court and confessed everything. He tried to blame Jason, then Sarah, but eventually the truth came out. His sentence would be long. The judge had even mentioned Sarah's courage, how her bravery had helped bring down a dangerous group. When Daniels finally stood to leave, he looked at her with quiet pride. "You should be proud of yourself, Sarah. You survived something most people couldn't. And you didn't just survive, you rebuilt." After he left, Sarah stepped outside. The rain had stopped, and the air was fresh. She walked slowly down the road, looking at the small houses, the streetlights glowing softly. Every sound felt alive. The rustle of leaves, the hum of crickets, the distant laughter of children. That night, she tucked Ethan into bed. He looked sleepy but happy. "Mom," he murmured, "do we have to move again?" She smiled, brushing his hair from his forehead. "No, sweetheart. We're staying right here. Forever. Forever," she said softly. He smiled and drifted off to sleep, his small hand still holding hers. Later, Sarah sat on the porch, looking up at the stars. The sky was wide and endless, full of light. She thought about everything that had happened. The fear, the losses, the courage she didn't know she had. Every scar, every tear, every sleepless night had led her here. To peace, to freedom, to a new life for her and her son. In the quiet, she whispered to the night, "We made it." The wind brushed gently against her face, almost as if answering back. She closed her eyes and smiled. For the first time, the past didn't scare her anymore. It was behind her. A story of survival, of strength, of a woman who refused to give up even when the world turned against her. Weeks passed, and life continued beautifully. Sarah became close with Mrs. Brooks, helped at school events, and even started painting again. Something she had loved before everything went wrong. Her small house slowly filled with color and laughter. Ethan painted stars on his bedroom wall, saying, "Now we have the sky inside too." Sometimes, when strangers walked into the cafe, Sarah still felt a small flicker of fear, an instinct that never truly left. But it always faded quickly when she reminded herself that this was a new world now, a safe one. Months later, on a sunny morning, she stood by the window again with a cup of coffee, just like she had that first morning after Jason's death. But this time, she didn't feel broken or lost. She felt strong, alive. Ethan ran into the room, laughing, waving his report card. "Look, Mom, I got an A." She pulled him into a hug, laughing through happy tears. "I'm so proud of you." As they stood there, sunlight filling the room, Sarah realized something. She hadn't just survived. She had won. Not by fighting back with violence, but by refusing to let fear define her. She had taken her pain and turned it into strength. And as she watched Ethan smile, She knew one thing for certain. The world could try to break her, but it would never silence her again. Because the sound they never heard, the one that ended it all, wasn't just the gunshot that night. It was the strength of a woman who chose to rise again. The story of Sarah and Ethan wasn't one of tragedy anymore. It was a story of rebirth, of hope that refused to die, no matter how dark the night had been. And in that small town, under a bright new sky, Sarah finally whispered the words she had waited so long to say, "We're home."